course. Now you know we agree with that. But
so therefore, the point being is Jesus is not somehow in succession.
Right.
He is the preeminent one over all creation.
Now where do you get? Now where do you get?
You're saying he always existed. That's
Pardon me?
Is that what you're saying? He always existed? Is that what you're saying?
Okay, I'm not. Excuse me. I'm not saying I wouldn't say that, but I am saying that I'm not saying that at this point. All I'm saying at this point is that this verse teaches that he's the preeminent one over all creation.
Meaning he is the preeminent one.
It's different. It's different than saying, for instance, if I were to count 1, 2, 3 through 10.
Okay.
Okay, and I were to say Jesus is number 1, and you're number 2, and I'm number 4. Okay. Preeminent one does not deal with who's first, second, and third. It's the preeminent one is the one that's basically over all the count. Okay, there's no first, second, third, fourth. He's just the preeminent one, sort of like the boss, sort of like in charge of type thing.
Okay, so what you're saying is that we shouldn't believe that scripture?
Oh, I say you believe it, but when you read the verse, when you use the firstborn, don't beat some drum that somehow Jesus came into existence as a result of this verse. Now, if you got some other verse you can use, fine. But this verse, all this verse is saying is he's just the preeminent one over all creation. That's my only point.
Okay, let's go. Let's one last time. Let's take a look back at that scripture. Now, one thing we don't like to do.
Which scripture?
Colossians 1:15.
1:15. What we don't like to do is add or take away. Now, what you're saying to me is that you're going to take away the firstborn, and you're telling me to minimize it.
No, I'm not. I'm saying
to you, not to look at it.
No,
like,
excuse me.
Okay.
What I'm saying very clearly is the Bible has set the precedent.
Okay.
The Bible has set the precedent that firstborn does not mean firstborn like we think it, as the firstborn out of the womb is 1, the secondborn out of the womb is 2, and 3 and 4. What the Bible has set the precedence is the firstborn from God's position is the preeminent one. That is why the secondborn from God's position is the firstborn. He's the preeminent one. And I'm simply saying Colossians is speaking here about Jesus as the preeminent one.
Okay. And once again, that's your opinion.
Yeah, but it's based upon a biblical principle.
And our opinion is based upon this biblical scripture.
Well, so's mine. It's just that you don't have a word.
Right.
You cannot use a word in the Bible without a definition. And the best definition, the way we determine definitions in the Bible, the primary way is not going to the Greek, which is fine, but the primary way is context. That takes precedence over everything else.
For sure.
And the context is that firstborn means preeminence. That's from God's perspective. So I'm not changing anything. I'm just simply saying to you that the translators would have been better in their translation to refer to Jesus as the preeminent one rather than the firstborn, since we do know that the firstborn can mean two things. It can mean the first out of the womb, but it also can mean who God declares as the preeminent one. It can have two different meanings. And therefore, I'm simply saying in this particular case, it means the preeminent one.
Okay, so the particular case that you're talking about is Ephraim and Manasseh. And the subject that I'm talking about is spiritual.
And I'm talking about spiritual too.
Yeah, you're just saying
I'm saying firstborn is from God's perspective the preeminent one.
Well, let's get Jesus' perspective on if he was firstborn or not. Let's go to Proverbs 8. And let's let him tell us his perspective on if he was the firstborn of all creation. Proverbs 8. That's interesting, though. I find that interesting how you set that up, because I can see where you are going with it. It would look like a contradiction, and the only reason it's not for me is because I am separating it. I'm not looking at it as...
Well, no, it's not a...
It looks like a contradiction.
No, excuse... Oh, you mean in Genesis versus Jeremiah verse?
No, Genesis versus Colossians.
Oh, first of all, there's no contradiction.
No, there is no contradiction.
There's no contradiction in Colossians. There's an apparent contradiction in Genesis versus Jeremiah.
Right. and those are the two scriptures that you were really stating, right?
As a basis to
firstborn.
You interpret the Bible by the Bible, and so I'm establishing the fact by quoting those verses.
Okay.
That firstborn can mean the preeminent one from God's perspective, from Jehovah's perspective.
Okay. Yeah, I'll go with that. That's pretty. That's interesting, and and I can see between those two scriptures, it said clearly that he wasn't. That he was the first one over here, and then over here it said that he was the second. So I can see where you're going.
So when you see the word firstborn, you think firstborn in your mind. You kind of think it of the way of Genesis. When I see the word firstborn in Colossians, I'm thinking the way of Jeremiah, the verse in Jeremiah, the preeminent one. Right. You're thinking Genesis, firstborn out of the womb. That's your thinking on Colossians, where I'm thinking Jeremiah in Colossians. Do you follow what I just said?
Yes, yes. And that is that I can understand that. But don't take that scripture that you just said, those scriptures and how you came up with the firstborn. Don't take that scenario and apply it to everything. That applies to that. That's it.
What do you mean applies to that?
Okay, you see how you just that firstborn.
We established the fact of Egypt, the firstborn. We already established that they were the legitimate firstborn. In other words, when they went out and they killed the firstborn of all of Egypt.
Right.
Okay. They weren't making mistakes in killing the second or thirdborn. Exactly. They wanted to make sure it was the firstborn. Okay. So what I'm simply saying is we've established the pattern of Scripture here. Firstborn can mean first one out of the womb, yes, but it can also mean preeminent one.
Okay, gotcha. We can agree on that.
Okay.
Okay.
So you're going to ask a question.
No, I was going to say, well, let's go over here to Proverbs 8, and let's look at, and I just want your opinion on it.
Yeah.
You just read it and just tell me who you think is being talked about here. And we're going to start in 22. And you'll end like right around